FK Željezničar is one of the greatest Bosnian football clubs and historically is up there with some of the greatest clubs in the region. They have been crowned champions in Yugoslavia once and have managed to triumph in the Bosnian Cup and League 6 times each. Their historical success is undeniable, but in recent times, cracks have begun to show. The last time that the Blues have won a cup was in 2017, and their last Bosnian League title was over 10 years ago. Now, on the surface, that on its own isn't too concerning, but this season, things really took a turn for the worst. The 6-time league champions are seriously threatened by dropping out of the top flight and are currently in 10th place, level on points with 11th, which is the relegation zone. So how did this come about? Now, I could give you a long breakdown of Zeljeznicar's history, but I'm trying to get this video out before 2024, so I'm going to have to speedrun through most of the important stuff. Zeljeznicar's history is very rich, and I'm sure I'm going to get to covering that at some point on this channel. Not today, though. Alright, quick little recap, let's go. On the 19th of September 1921, a group of railway workers formed a club in the city of Sarajevo named Zeljezničar. They had no support from outside organizations, unlike most clubs in the city, and were not strict on an ethnic basis, welcoming any religion and any nationality into the club. Following the end of World War II in 1946, they would win the regional league in Bosnia and Herzegovina to get promotion to the top flight of Yugoslavian football. Despite a few relegations, they'd always bounce back and were a staple in the highest league of Yugoslavia. The key season during this time frame was the 1971-1972 season, as they would win their first Yugoslav League title. During this entire period, a big rivalry would be formed between Zeljezničar and FK Sarajevo. But if you want to know more about that, you can check out the video I made specifically covering the Sarajevo Derby. The link should be in the description and in the annotations. This is definitely not a shameless plug. Shut up. Now, this following part I'm going to cover a little bit more thoroughly. Not too much though, I'm not fucking macro. In 1992, once Bosnia and Herzegovina declared independence, war broke out and a game that was set to be played between Zeljezničar and FK Rad was abandoned half an hour before kickoff due to gunfire being heard around the stadium. The stadium at which Zeljezničar played their matches, the Grbavca Stadium, was right on the front lines and within no time was destroyed. Despite all of the aforementioned, they still took part in the 94-95 First League of Bosnia and Herzegovina Championship, which had a very different format that was kind of weird, but their general 4th place finish was much less important with the fact that they were able to play whatsoever. An early iconic moment for the club came in the 1997-98 season when they won their first title with a last-minute winner against city rivals FK Sarajevo. The only goal of the match was scored by Željezničar forward Hadis Zubanović, and still to this day among Željezničar club fans, this day is celebrated under the title of Zubandan. The club would repeat their success 5 more times in 2001, 2002, 2010, 2012, and 2013 for the last time. For that period, they'd create some incredible players through their youth academy, but most notable is definitely Edin Dzeko. Now, that all sounds lovely and perfect, you know, sunshine and roses. So, where did it go wrong? Just a quick little ad break to let you know that you should totally subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. My 10 seconds are up. Goodbye. They've had dips in form in the past, sure have gone trophyless for a couple seasons, but this is easily the worst it's ever been, so we're going to try to do a little analysis here. Join me. The 2022-23 season ended on a somewhat positive note with young manager Bašić at the helm. They finished in 3rd above their city rivals by 1 point, but both teams still made it to the Conference League playoffs anyway. And when you begin to analyze, the first issue that I spotted, and I think most people will agree with me, is the roster change. Armin Hodžić, both the striker and the midfielder, left the club, as did Santos. Those were some very key players, but alongside them, of course, Beganović, Hajdarević, and plenty more pieced off, all for free, and the club made no money. And to top it all off, the icing on the cake, club legend Samir Bekrić also retired from football that exact season. You'd expect the reinforcements that were set to be brought in to be really good, but they honestly weren't all that. They brought in some decent players for sure, Haris Ovčina, Mehmet Ćosić, Edin Ustemović, but generally, none of these guys have performed very well. Neither did the guys that I didn't mention. Of course, they brought in a few more players, but there's a reason as to why they're not being mentioned. But even with all of that, the start of the new season was actually surprisingly good. Željezničar drew Dinamo Minsk as their first opponents on their road to the Europa Conference League, and you can forget all I just said, because they would actually go on to win the tie. They'd draw 2-2 at home in the first leg, but then they would win 2-1 away from home, despite being the underdogs. Their road continued, and in the second round, they would face Azerbaijani side, Neftchi. I'm not sure if I said that right, I'm almost certain that I didn't, but we'll just roll with it. In the first leg at Grbavca, it ended as another 2-2 draw, following a last-minute screamer from Neftchi that silenced the Zeljeznicar supporters. This time around, away from home, they did not have the luck needed, and would lose 2-0 in a game that felt pretty bleak and hopeless for the Blues. This, of course, was not the perfect result, but at the end of the day, this wasn't too upsetting either. They did well, they definitely had fight in them, and they were looking forward to what seemed like a potentially really good season. Their first league match was against the vice-champions Banja Luka, and you might think that your head would drop once you lose in the second round of the Europa Conference League qualifications, but surprisingly it didn't. In front of the intense Grbavca support, they would win 2-0 against Banja Luka, and it honestly seemed quite comfortable too. It was, in a way, the perfect comeback to league football. What followed was an unfortunate loss to Posušje, 1-0 away from home, but they would bounce back with back-to-back home wins. However, this was just about as good as it was going to get for Željezničar under Nermin Bašić's guidance. What followed was an intense collapse that seems to happen out of nowhere. A 1-0 loss to Velez away from home on its own isn't very alarming, but a 3-2 loss to Gošk at home, followed by a 3-0 loss to Sluga, and then another loss to Zrinski, well, that becomes a bit of an issue. They were now sitting in 8th place out of 12 teams. So, far from the perfect start. They definitely needed a bit of a bounce-back win, and it seemed like they had one served on a silver platter. A Bosnian Cup game versus the second league team, Sloboda Tuzla, really should have been it. But it wasn't. They would lose 1-0, and just to sprinkle in some salt onto the wounds, the goal was scored by an FK Sarajevo player who was on loan at Sloboda. They have now lost 5 matches in a row. This was getting seriously troubling. They were out of the cup in the first round, and they were sitting in 8th position in the league, with the Sarajevo Derby right around the corner. Before facing FK Sarajevo, they still had to play Široki Breg at Grbavca, and they really needed to announce themselves for the derby because this, so far, was not looking good. Especially because the Clarets were shit hot at the time, and Željezničar just needed something to latch onto before the match. The game was locked at 1-1, and just as it looked like all they'd be able to grab is 1 point off of Široki Breg, a last-minute winner from Sulejman Kripić had the roof come off of Grbavca. There isn't an actual roof there, this is just a saying. Don't look too deep into it, just fucking go with the flow. They definitely needed this, but surprisingly enough, Nermin Bašić, their coach, would attempt to resign, but the Željo board wouldn't let him because with 7 days left until the derby, they just simply weren't going to find anyone better. And to add to that, despite some of the shitty results, a good majority of the fans, whether they doubted Nermin or not, still put all their support into him, which probably influenced the board's final decision. But either way, on the 8th of October 2023, Željezničar would pull up to Koševo, Sarajevo's home stadium, and the atmosphere was amazing. It was the second highest attended Sarajevo Derby in the last 20 years, and its scenes were very reminiscent of the good old days of Bosnian football. Off note, I really feel like this season the league has kind of recovered in a way, but that's just me. This was definitely the best showcase of it though. It was truly something to marvel at, but Željezničar were not prepared for the ass whooping they were about to receive. At the beginning of the game, things looked fairly tight, up until Sarajevo bagged the first goal, and then the floodgates opened. Aydin Hasic was the one who opened the scoring in the 26th minute, and that's when Željezničar started to look a little shaky. Just as it looked like they'd be able to escape the first half with only a 1-goal deficit, Renan Oliveira bagged in the 3rd minute of added time for the first half to make it 2-0. Added time continued to be ruthless and definitely unkind to Željezničar, as in the second half, they would score a goal that was ruled off for offside, and very quickly after that, Hamza Čataković would make it 3-0. That third goal would close out the game in dramatic fashion. This was something that definitely stung heavy, but at least what followed it was the international break, which could serve as a little bit of time for the club to regroup, refocus, and pick itself back up again. Their first return to club football was a scrappy but still deserved win over bottom of the league Zvezda. And then Nenad Bašić would seal his fate after a 2-0 loss away from home to 11th place Igman Konjic. And if you're wondering what I meant by he would seal his fate, I mean that the same club that, told him you can't resign were the ones that proceeded to sack him on November 1st. They went coachless for about a week, and in the meanwhile they would actually pick up 3 points versus Sloga. So how the fuck they do that? They would get their new coach in due time though, and his name was Abdul Hakim Al-Tuwairi. Don't know if I said that name right. Not like he deserves the correct pronunciation, you'll see why shortly. Želja's investors were Saudi Arabian. I'm only mentioning that now because it's only now that I need to. So with that in mind, it's a little suspicious as to why the fuck was a man with 0 prior job experience picked to manage this club. Doesn't speak the language, has never been a football manager before. Why the fuck is he here? I'm just echoing what most Željezničar fans thought or were outright saying online. But either way, moving on, Abdul Hakim this guy opened his managerial career with an instant 3-2 loss to Borac Banja Luka. Now this one, I can't be too harsh. Away from home, Zeljeznicar would play extremely well, and their loss would come very late on to a very suspicious goal on Borac's end. Not sure if Borac's end is a correct grammatical term, but you know what I mean. But again, it would not be the first time that Borac has done something dodgy and sketchy. People complain. Nothing happens, you just have to move on. Želja would pick up their first new points with their new manager against Posušje. Or I guess first new point, as they could only manage a draw. After another push and pull fucking chalk match, in which they just narrowly avoided another embarrassment at home, they would manage to grab a 1-1 result. Again, things only continued to get worse with their new manager. They would get torn inside out by averages can beat Tuzla City, with ID Nukic scoring in the first and 5th minute of the match. You actually cannot make this shit up. At the end of the match, the Maniacs, Željezničar's ultra group, turned their back to the players and during the game shouted countless insults at them, which is, I think, warranted at this point. Now, here's my opinion, which no one asked for. I think this is completely warranted. I don't think that most players deserve this, but these guys are not trying. I feel like from what I've seen, Željezničar's players only start playing either when it passes the 70th minute or when they're already losing by 2 goals. That's maybe just the image I'm getting, but if there are actually any Željezničar fans in the comments, I would love to know how you feel about all this. Again, no one gives a shit about what I have to say, but that's just my little take, my little game theory. Then another 1-0 loss at home followed to Velej Mostar, and they would do the same thing to Goška Bela, losing 1-0 away this time, so maybe it's a little bit more justifiable. Those 2 matches would wrap up their first part of the season in the most depressive manner possible, putting them in 10th place in the league. They were luckily saved by Velej, as if Igman had beaten them in their final match, Želja would have dropped into the 11th place, which is the relegation zone. Again, stark reminder here, this season is not over. There is still an entire half left to play, but I still feel like this is really alarming. This is the kind of dreadful start that you really can't have, because surviving was never the priority of Željezničar. At best, it was winning the title, and at worst, it was getting Europe. Again, I don't know if you know or don't that I am a Sarajevo fan. However, I still try to be unbiased when making this video, and I believe I achieved that. Again, not preying on Željezničar's downfall. I don't think most Sarajevo fans are. If for no other reason, the derby is probably the most fun and the best occasion in the league that brings in the most viewers. So I think the entire league gets damaged by Željezničar's drop into the second league. Not that I actually think they'll drop. I think they'll survive, but hypothetically. Follow my Instagram and follow my Twitter. I want to get to enough followers where I can start getting sponsored by laxative teen companies and OnlyFans models, because I'm trying to make some bread out here. It's tough. If you live in Sarajevo, stay safe. Do not go out without a mask. because apparently we live in communist China and someone keeps burning fucking coal and we're all dying of smog. I'll see you sometime soon, probably next year. Thank you all for watching, love you loads, and goodbye.